As one modern Bible commentator puts it, the Bible is, of course, full of excitement. Fighting and feasts and sex and weird food rules and weird sex rules. It's a real page turner, no doubt. But amid those rollicking good times, every now and then, there's a pause. What he's referring to is the transition between the book of Leviticus, which we finished reading last week, and Numbers, the book of Torah that we began reading this Shabbat. As Rabbi Geffen taught last Friday night, Leviticus ends in Parashat Bechukotai, what she called one of the year's two most disturbing Torah portions, containing an expansive list of curses that the Torah says will befall us should we stray from the right and holy path. This week's portion is less of a page turner. Numbers opens on the first day of the second month in the second year following the exodus from the land of Egypt. God spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, returning us to where the book of Exodus left off, 2 years into the Israelites' 40-year trek through the wilderness. I intentionally use the term wilderness rather than desert. Desert connotes a deprived environment, void of any potential growth. I know that children's storybooks, and perhaps like mine, your religious school teachers also taught you that our ancestors wandered the desert for 40 years. But that interpretation robs us of a deeper understanding of our ancestors' journey and a grasp of the book of Numbers in the whole. As Rabbi Ed Feinstein teaches, Bamidbar means in the wilderness, for the book commences in the wilderness of Sinai. But more than a physical location, Bamidbar depicts a social wilderness, a human wasteland, he says. This is a place where everything falls apart. It portrays a people wandering without a shared vision, shared values, or shared words. Leaders attempt to lead, but no one listens. The people of this wilderness, driven by fear and jealousy, moved only by hunger, thirst, and lust, have no patience for God's vision. This is a book of noise, frustration, and pain. As Rabbi Feinstein paints it, this isn't much of a pause in the narrative at all, but a quintessential moment that our people overcome enormous obstacles. Although it takes them 40 years, together they learn to thrive as Bnei Israel, the people of Israel. Later in the book, when we read of the Israelites wandering from one point to the next along their way, Torah tells us they marched from Midbar to Matana. Sure. Perhaps they wandered from an encampment called Midbar to another called Matana, but as Rabbi Feinstein points out, this narrative must be interpreted metaphorically. From Midbar to Matana. You know the Hebrew Midbar means wilderness. The word Matana means gift. So we may glean, as the great commentator Rashi does, from the wilderness was it given to them as a gift. Nod your head if you're still with me. Okay, now here's a question for all of you. What do you think Rashi means by it in his comment from the wilderness was it given to them as a gift?
I said the experience.
The experience. Great. The Torah. Perfect. Thankfulness. Thank you. Great answers. The wilderness is where Moses and Aaron and Miriam demonstrated their leadership. The wilderness is a place of empowerment for Bezalel and Oholiav and all of the people who partook in the Mishkan building project, welcoming God's presence into their midst. The wilderness is where the people danced and prayed and built a civilization with laws and infrastructure and division of labor. The wilderness is where we received Torah atop Mount Sinai, a gift that we'll celebrate on the festival of Shavuot this weekend. You see, the wilderness represents chaos and uncertainty and wandering and wandering and wandering, but it also represents our people's leadership and resilience, empowerment, the civilization that was created, and our Torah. Midbar mustn't be understood as a barren desert, but a wilderness, a place of both chaos and awesome possibility. Throughout Jewish tradition, we're reminded that chaos and conflict can be very productive. I'm looking out at all of our medical professionals, many of you sitting right next to each other, right there, as I think about what we know of how we build muscle. When lifting weights, we actually cause tiny micro tears in the muscle fibers, which our body then repairs so that we can better handle lifting that same weight next time. When we exercise, we inflict damage to our body, ripping muscle fiber so that our muscles can repair and grow. We're all familiar with the popular mantra, no pain, no gain, but did you know that this saying is actually a Jewish teaching? Our sages taught in Mishnah, according to the labor is the reward. In other words, no pain, no gain. Think too about how nature replenishes and grows. The healthiest forests and rangelands are those that naturally burn. Under normal conditions, fires play a vital role in removing excess fuels and maintaining normal plant composition. When burning through forested areas, these fires remove underbrush and dead growth, while healthy, mature trees survive. The destructive power of the fire actually cleanses the forest, enabling it to thrive. And this is true of our lives too. I've said this before. I had a professor in rabbinical school who, in his great wisdom, counseled my classmates and me to always give the sermon that we too need to hear. For me personally, I can think of no more compelling a lesson today as my wife Carly and I anticipate the birth of our second child in just 3 weeks. Oh, thanks. Cool. We are on the precipice of a new wilderness experience, one that will be marked by sleepless nights and seemingly extra long days, but nonetheless, this experience too is a gift from God. While this week's Torah portion might feel like a bit of a letdown after the drama of last week's, perhaps it is just the pause we need before diving into the richness of Bamidbar, this 4th book of Torah. A book that is not intended to be a hiker's guide through the Sinai desert, but inspiration for each of us as we navigate the ins and outs of our complicated lives. May we feel strengthened by our people's history of resilience and comforted knowing that we are not alone in our journey. Even in those moments of chaos and difficulty, there is great possibility. Indeed, each life experience is a gift from on high and an opportunity for growth. Shabbat Shalom.